Zoom evening. I guess I'll start over.
Okay.
Welcome everyone to another Zoom evening history talk, which is part of the Marin History Museum's lecture series. First, I want to give you some updates on Marin History Museum news. We are moving our library and research facility back to the Boyd Gatehouse. It is just so exciting. And soon after that, we will start doing our exhibiting. That will resume in the Gatehouse as well. So follow our website to get updates. A big note here. So look at our website to follow any updates on the dates of when things will be opening. You also can follow us, of course, on Facebook for getting those dates. In the meantime, of course, research is always available by emailing me at research@marinhistory.org. That will continue. But as always, we depend on your support to create these events. And if you're able to donate to our continued programs, please visit our website at www.marinhistory.org and feel free to make a donation. You can also see all the other information, what's going on, our monthly newsletter and such. During this presentation, if you have any questions, please use the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. It's usually at the bottom, might be somewhere else on your computer. And I'll track those questions and I'll share them with our guests at the end. But I understand it'll kind of be open mic as they will be able to take questions that way. So either way, if you think of a question during the presentation, feel free to just chat that little question over to me. But for tonight's event, tonight's talk and presentation, I'm going to bring you up a little bit. So maybe some of you attended my walking tours that I did of the Poor Farm and its location and the cemetery, or maybe you visited the open space office that's located there, or maybe even you hung out at Juvenile Hall. But tonight's presentation is called A Silent Legacy, and it covers the missing history in this documentary of the Marin County's first public cemetery. It began as a Marin School of the Arts assignment for 2 high school students. Then quickly it became a project of passion, research, and interviews, eventually receiving wide news coverage and awards from multiple film festivals. I remember seeing this on the news on TV. It wasn't long before the 2 directors succeeded in a campaign for official recognition of the Poor Farm graveyard, and approval by the Board of Supervisors was granted in 2019. So now I would like to introduce Mitchell Tanaka. He's a journalist and filmmaker, and Georgia Lee, his partner in this documentary, as a filmmaker and producer. So I'm going to turn it over to Mitchell and Georgia. They'll introduce themselves and their presentation to us. So take it over, Mitchell.
Hi, yes, thank you all for coming in the first place. It's so wonderful to see all of you coming out to check out this film and learn a little bit of history. But yes, my name is Mitchell Tanaka. I'm a filmmaker and journalist student down at Chapman University. And I went to school with Georgia Lee, who is also here in high school.
Hey, I'm Georgia. I'm currently a filmmaker and producer at Columbia College Chicago. And yeah, we began this documentary in high school. So that was a super fun journey. And Mitchell has a super fun story about how we stumbled across it.
Yeah, so, you know, it was really just the middle of high school. I was nearing the end of my time at Marin School of the Arts and really wanted to get into documentary filmmaking, but there wasn't really something that, you know, you need something to drive you to investigate in the first place. And it just so happened that the nearby Parks and Recreation field office down in Jeanette Prandy Way, down in Lucas Valley, was hosting a Halloween spooky walk. And so me and my family all went on the spooky walk, and near the end there was actually a very interesting little piece where, you know, they have this, you know, kind of Halloween decorated graveyard out, but what they revealed is that you're in fact standing on an actual graveyard, one that didn't have any markings or any sort of delineation. And they were talking about this long history of people who had been buried there and how it still remains unrecognized. And so that was something that really caught my eye. And I turned to Georgia, as we had worked together many times in our film classes at high school, and decided to produce a documentary out of it. And then for the next 5 9 months as we all continue to research and interview and produce video with many of our friends and many experts, some of which are here today. So yes, that was the process. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. So I can show my from my screen. Should I share my screen right now?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Does everybody see this? Yeah. Okay. All right. Here we go.
To many residents of Marin County, California, there's nothing special about this field. Located in between a juvenile hall, a senior home, and a park ranger office, it appears wholly ordinary. But for a select few, this quiet patch of land contains a secret history. Beneath its soil and marked only by numbered bronze tiles, more than 280 recorded people remain buried without recognition in what was once a functioning graveyard. Over a century of both tragic misfortunes and acts of humanity contribute to what has become, until now, a silent legacy.
I'm Mike Warner. I'm an open space park ranger with Marin County Parks. We manage 16,000 acres of open space throughout Marin County. My background is in historical geography, and I've worked on many different historical research projects throughout the county. I had heard stories from the other rangers here about the site and started doing some research on my own and collecting the information that we had here. There's no real information out on the internet that's easily available to find about the site.
While the Marin County Cemetery was officially established in 1893, no one knows exactly when the first burial occurred here. Many experts believe this site was used for burials long before it was officially deemed a cemetery.
The best record we have, and that was provided by the Marin County Library, is about 285 people are buried in the graveyard, but that record starts in about 1924. I've heard estimates as high as 1,500, but given the size of the land there, I would tend to think that it's closer to 285.
We have some primary source documentation on the cemetery. Things get deposited here in this collection, and they have been for decades. My name is Carol Aquaviva, and I'm a librarian and the digital archivist here in the Ann T. Kent, California room, which is a special collection of Marin County's history. People who were buried at the cemetery would have been buried there because they didn't leave behind provisions for burials, or they didn't have relatives or friends or next of kin to pay for burial. If a death occurred in the county, let's say a body washed up on shore and there was no identification, that would be someone who would probably be buried at the poor farm. So poor farms go all the way back to medieval Europe. The population ranged from newborn babies to the elderly and everything in between. Society felt like, these people are a bother to see on the streets, to make some kind of provision for them. So in 1880, the Board of Supervisors decided that this was something that was necessary, so they passed a resolution establishing the county poor farm.
The farm was more so for self-production of food for the people that were dependent on the farm. The products were dairy, mainly, and then also vegetables. It was a site for basically indebted folks. So if you owed money and you couldn't pay it,
Residents of the Marin County Poor Farm were often referred to at the time as inmates, but the word's meaning differs from what one might think of today.
Today, we would call them residents or patients. But back then, inmates was the term that they used, which is unfortunate because we think prisoner when we hear inmate, and that implies that these people have done something bad or they're a danger to society. And that really, wasn't the case. It was more of a term of circumstance or condition. But it does say something about how our society treats people who are poor as if it's their fault. This is before kind of structural welfare and before a lot of kind of social consciousness of what to do with people who were struck by poverty. Inmates were free to leave, so it really wasn't a prison. In fact, I see it in the records that a lot of times someone would leave and then come back like a couple months later and then leave and then come back. It probably depends on their, what their life situation was.
By the turn of the century, the farm was not only operational, but also well kept. Several county articles from the period note the comfortable bedrooms and filling meals that the farm had to offer. However, this isn't to say that the establishment didn't have its rough patches. In 1911, the Poor Farm caught fire and burned to ashes. The establishment was rebuilt 2 years later, but even then, issues eventually arose.
In about the mid-1950s, the facility itself, the buildings were deemed unsafe and not earthquake safe. And it would have been a tremendous expense for the county to rebuild or retrofit.
But the end of the farm did not mark the end of the graveyard's operations. Many of the deceased were of the local county hospital, which ran from 1932 to 1963. Similar to the graveyard and the Poor Farm, the Marin County Hospital was designed to take in residential patients struck with poverty. Some were afflicted with mental illnesses or incurable diseases such as tuberculosis.
to be eligible to be what they call committed to the hospital, you would either be your doctor that would sign a notice and have you sent to the hospital here in Lucas Valley, or it would be actually a county board of supervisor had the power at the time to commit somebody. At its height, there was about 40 patients in the hospital, and there's 24 nurses that were on staff to take care of the patients. The nurses lived in a dormitory, which actually was a former, what they called a pest house from back in the days of the original farm buildings. And the pest house was somewhere that if you had a disease that couldn't be cured, you would be housed in the pest house at the farm instead of with the general population, the rest of the people that lived at the farm. The hospital was shut down in 1963. The building was no longer up to current seismic code. The conditions were deteriorating and they didn't have enough money to upgrade the facility. The dormitory for the nurses is actually one of the few remaining buildings that is left from the hospital.
Today, it acts as storage space for the county's education records. The farm, hospital, and graveyard were often interconnected and constantly interacting with one another. The Poor Farm often supplied the county hospital with its produce, and the graveyard was used to bury inmates from both complexes. But these simple panels conceal a plethora of stories. For instance, grave 235. Indistinguishable from the rest, this grave holds the body of Marin Buddy Thompson, an inmate from Alcatraz prison in the 1940s.
He was a bank robber from Texas who eventually ended up being incarcerated at Alcatraz. During his time there, he and several other inmates orchestrated the breakout at Alcatraz, also known as the Battle of Alcatraz.
My name is Jolene Babiak. I lived on Alcatraz as a child when I was 7 to 9 and also when I was 15. My father worked there for 9 years. I think Thompson thought he got a raw deal. He always thought he got a raw deal. That's the story he told. But he did. I mean, his mother died, and then a year later, his father said, get lost. You're on your own. It's 10. So he comes out to Alcatraz in October of 1945, which means he's a new guy. Within 6 months, he was involved with Coy, Kresser, and the others in the Battle of 46.
He and another inmate were convicted after the fact for the murder of a couple of the prison guards at Alcatraz. He was put to death at San Quentin prison in a gas chamber.
Hell, I'm not afraid to die. If I was, I wouldn't be in this racket. These were Thompson's last words.
Afterwards, his family didn't want to claim his body. His body was handed over to the county for disposal, and they buried him here at the county farm in grave 235. I've heard of a few people going out to the graveyard and looking for ghosts or trying to experience some sort of spiritual experience. And even so, here, since our office is right across the street, I've heard from coworkers who have had weird instances or seen weird things that have happened here. The only experience I've really had here once was coming here very early in the morning, probably about 6 in the morning, and going out to one of our garages and hearing someone walking around in one of the loft. It was a very interesting experience. I could hear someone clearly walking up steps and up to the loft, but I didn't see them. Definitely an unexplainable instance that I'll always remember. Right now, the burial grounds are actually owned by our landscape department for Marin County Park, so it's a different division. It's not necessarily the open space, but it's managed quite like an open space now. It's kind of left in its natural condition. There's no signs or facilities to mark that it is an actual graveyard.
My name is Ron Marinoff. I'm a 53-year resident of Upper Lucas Valley in Marin County. I moved here in 1963, and I bought one of the first Eichler homes in Upper Lucas Valley. We became aware from some people at the county that there was a burial ground. We tried to get Marin County to at least put up like a split rail fence around it to show a little reverence that people were buried there. But we got no interest at all from county government. So there still is no delineation of any kind of where it starts and where it stops. I think in a way it's disrespectful. There should be more reverence for people who die in that condition.
In the later decades, the cemetery was overgrown. It didn't get as much care as maybe it deserved just because of lack of funding and things like that. It would be a good thing to recognize the people that are buried there, to kind of give dignity to them.
Last October, you just started seeing signage for come to Parks and Rec's spooky Halloween hike. And at a certain point, one of the rangers came out and started talking about, a lot of people don't know this, but you are actually at a gravesite. And so we're looking around like, where's the gravesite?
As I understand it, I'm not sure exactly where it is, but I believe I'm one of the closest homeowners because I live towards the edge of the Lucas Valley.
It's kind of weird to think about that there's just like 200 plus people buried out there, especially since I used to ride my bike past it every day.
Usually when there's a graveyard, it's a big deal. There's a fence around it. And people know, oh, that's a graveyard. That's a place that you should be when you're there, you're a little bit quieter.
I think it would make a lot of sense and would be kind to people's memories if there was some acknowledgement that they existed, if there was some arrangement whereby the area could be marked off, and indeed that people's names could be shown, because those people were as important as we are, and why should they not be acknowledged?
I am shocked that nothing has been done specifically regarding environmental concerns. A fence is not that invasive. A sign especially is not that invasive.
And you see it with trails all the time, right? I mean, I think we got a few trails over in Lucas Valley Estates that have been updated with signs. Your taxpayer dollars have just allowed us to open up this trail.
I definitely think that people have the right to be remembered, especially if they have loved ones who don't know where they're buried.
It's really up to us presently on our own independent free will to interpret what that person's existence means to us.
Eventually, what happens if you don't connect people to their history, that history will be forgotten. Without that site to kind of memorialize it, all that really stands is basically us in this room knowing about it and the documents that we have. There's people buried from all walks of life in the graveyard. You know, those are people's sons and daughters and parents and grandparents, you know, or cousins, brothers, sisters, things like that out there.
Well, Mitchell and Georgia, that was beautiful and fantastic. I learned a lot. Your production is fantastic. I truly understand how you earned and gained those awards. I think that's fantastic.
Thank you so much.
I learned a lot.
Thank you so much.
I want to ask, when I did the tour, of course, the grave markers are not where you see them now, is probably not where they're originally located. It's obvious that the top of that grade of that land, that over the flooding and different weather conditions, they have sloughed and moved down. And people in the past have stolen the markers. So there are very few markers left, at least there's very few that I could identify. But there's a group of trees, and I wonder if you ran into this at all. You know, John Lucas owned that land originally, inheriting it from Timothy Murphy. So either the Lucases or possibly Murphy had some kind of outbuilding at the top of the grade where the markers are. It seems there's a group of trees that are definitely growing in a square. Did you ever get any information that there had previously been some kind of house or building from early 1800s? Because I always felt I just had a feeling that there had been a house there because of the type of trees that would have bordered a foundation or something.
You know what's very interesting is, while I don't recall anything about a building in that specific area, there was a very specific document that we found that was around like early 1950s that had to do with just kind of city planning, especially for that Lucas Valley Marinwood area. And a lot of it had to do with plotting specific tree lines in order to kind of conceal that particular area, including the hospital and the graveyard.
Just felt like there was something there. See if I have any questions going on here. Let's see. Thank yous, congratulations. That's from David. Erica Ramirez is a graduate student at Sonoma State University. She's researching the Poor Farm Cemetery for her thesis, and I'd like to talk to you guys more about it. Is there a way someone can contact you, David, or she can contact me at the museum at research@marinhistory.org? And of course, Carol Aquaviva is still at the California room at the Marin County Free Library. But how about you? Can anyone contact you, David or Georgia? This girl, Erica Ramirez is doing her thesis, and she'd like to talk to someone.
I think Mitchell or Georgia, right?
Yes.
Yes.
No, Erica, by all means, I can send you both of our emails right now, and you're more than
I
welcome
can send
to
you my email too.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm sure David knows just as much because my poor family has to hear all this from me all the time constantly too.
Oh yeah, he's a bona fide expert.
Yes. Somebody is asking if the bodies are actually buried under those stones. Not necessarily under where you might locate a stone because the stones have moved. They've either moved by the land sloughing down and flooding, or people trying to steal them and then maybe dropped them someplace else and they've kind of semi-embedded back into the dirt. There's no plot map anywhere identifying locations like, square maps, like you might find at a regular cemetery that you might see if you go on my tours of Mount Olivet Cemetery.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I know a large bit, and something that I, in retrospect, wish we both spent a little bit more time examining in this documentary is the history before the recorded history, specifically things to do with the area being kind of a Miwok burial ground for so long. I think that's a large part of why people think there's a lot more bodies buried there than what's recorded. Mm-hmm. And obviously there's not very many records to go off of, so it's not like we could really dive into that if we wanted to, but it is something that I think when we talk about, are there bodies buried under headstones, there might be more than we usually think.
Yeah. Someone is asking if there's any homes in Lucas Valley buried on top of the graves. I don't believe so. I think the housing development was designed outside of the area that was designated for the juvenile hall, the hospital, the housing units, and the actual cemetery land that was designated for that purpose. You have anything different on that? No houses on the grave sites.
No, not that we know. It seems pretty contained to
the cemetery. The cemetery itself is located directly across the bike path from the open space office that's on Jeanette Prandy Way. If somebody wanted to go to the open space office or contact them, if you were looking at the office and you turned around, you would see a overgrown grassy area that's not developed, and if you chose to walk through the tall grass and risk snake bite and ticks, you might find one of those burial markers that was actually made by putting cement into something like the size of a coffee can and then a metal marker on that. And back in the 70s, when it was a practice to deface cemeteries, a lot of those markers were stolen or the whole cement plug pulled up.
I have a question.
Yeah, Ann.
Am I unmuted?
No, you're unmuted.
Everybody's unmuted. What's happening now? Can you tell us a little bit about how they're trying to preserve the area and all of that? Get us up to,
Yeah,
Did you want to show the video?
Yeah.
yeah,
let's do that.
definitely. Do you have that, Georgia?
I don't have it pulled up, no.
Okay, I can show it. I don't think it'll play audio, but we can kind of just go over it, Georgia, you and I, if you want to talk over it. Okay,
Yeah,
give me just a
definitely.
moment.
So after the documentary came out, this was May 2018, we decided to use it. Oh, I think it's,
Oh,
is it working?
yes,
Yes.
it
Working
is.
a little bit.
Oh, is it working all right?
It's working.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, so this, Georgia, if you want to kind of dive into the
Hey, Georgia, you could talk
restoration.
over it.
Okay. So yeah, May 2018, the documentary came out, and then we kind of use it as a force to talk to local politicians, to really get the ball moving on building the fence and getting the sign up. It was a very long process. It took months to do. We had many meetings with Mr. Damon Connolly, many times going to his office and talking. You know, we brought Ron Marinoff from the documentary. He came with us to really help us push for this too. But the big concern was, will Lucas Valley residents actually want the fence? So we had to create a survey, and we had a little pop-up tent, and residents came by one afternoon and told us that they wanted it in the end. It was an overwhelmingly high yes, we want this. So after we took that information, we took it to Damon, and we raised the funds, we figured out the date, and then as you can see in the video, we picked a day. This was August 2019. Mitchell and I and some friends who were really nice, and Mitchell's family came out, and we literally built the fence with our hands. And it was really fun and satisfying to see finally, like, the documentary is paying off, and we're enacting change in the community.
Yeah, and something that I just remembered, Georgia, is that we were really fortunate in our timing with the petition, because that was right as the fires were going on in Sonoma, and I believe there was some petition going around that was very popular about having school excused for the time that the air was really bad. And it was right then that week that we posted this petition. So it started off with roughly 200 signatures, mainly from family and friends. And then it became something that I think got over 4,000 signatures. And a lot of that was just because of this focus on the Bay Area from the same side at the same time.
That's fabulous.
Well
What a
done.
success.
Let's see, we have more questions here. Kathy Devlin says that she has a certificate for a baby born in 1919 that states it was buried there. I'm sure the California room has the same death records as the Marin History Museum has. We have a record of the numbers and the names of the burial names, not the locations, because there's no plot map, but we have the names of who was buried there. Now, it also could have been people were exhumed and reburied someplace else. Say somebody was here in Marin County, was hospitalized during the influenza epidemic, died, was buried in the Poor Farm, and then, you know, years later, their family in Kansas says, "Oh my gosh, we want Uncle Joe," and he may have been exhumed and moved. So some of the records aren't updated, and that's kind of the reason the number has changed on the record of just saying how many are there. The graveyard is located directly opposite the open space office on Jeanette Prandy Lane. If you were
Darcy,
looking at
could you come up a level from that? I mean, I don't know where that is, for example.
Jeanette Prandy,
Yeah.
it crosses Lucas Valley Road.
So you take, if you're coming up 101, what do you do?
You take Lucas Valley Road going west, and you take a right on Jeanette Prandy, and it's a dead end. You just follow it around. You go past Juvenile Hall, then you go to the open space office. And looking at the office, you turn around directly and you're looking at a grassy field.
So Jeanette Prandy Way is, you take a right at the mini mart where Big Rock Cafe is. So that's exactly where, and then it's the next right.
No, I forgot about Big Rock Cafe. Gosh, used to be a gas station with a tiger in front of it. That's how old I am. Judy Main says there's a device that can locate burials that was used to find all the buried children. It won't work out there, Judy, because they're not marked. Nothing is accurate anymore. Jill missed the part where the graveyard is located. We just repeated that. Oh, look at this. Marilyn Geary is so happy that there's young people studying history. You guys really did a detailed, concentrated documentary, and what access to technology you had. I'm just so impressed with all the credits at the end that there was that much.
We had a lot of help for sure,
but just how fantastic it was available to you.
We were just very fortunate because we attended Marin School of the Arts in Nevada, and the film program there is just so incredible, and they have so much resources for us to use, and they have so much equipment, and just the amount of people that are willing to help. We wouldn't have been able to do it without them. So it was really like a team effort of just so many different people in the community coming together.
And just the willingness too of the local history community to reach out and be a part of it. Like Carol from the documentary is here with us as well. And
isn't Carol wonderful?
We really couldn't have we would have no story if it weren't for people being willing to help educate us too.
Oh, aren't we great? See, Anita McPherson is saying the Marin County Genealogy Society researched the names of the people buried there as assistance to the Missing America Project, and she gives a website. You can also access the names by the buried as compiled by Kathy Gowdy on the Find a Grave website. I think you'd have to have a name to use Find a Grave, not sure.
I just want to jump in real quick, Marcy, and just
thanks, Carol.
Say that there's the graveyard, and then there's the hospital and the farm. So sometimes people would go to the hospital, but they might not have died there, or they might have died there and not have been buried there. So in the California room, we have records that span the hospital records, death records, internment records. So I've had a lot of folks come to me for genealogy lookups, and maybe it wasn't that the person was buried there, but they might have died there. And so you can glean information from there, like next of kin and who paid for the burial, or who paid, who else was involved in whatever actions happened at the cemetery. So it's a great genealogical resource, even if the person wasn't buried there, or even if you're not certain. Be glad to share those with anyone who would like to look at that material.
Carol, is the California room open and accessible to people?
So we remain closed right now. The libraries are just kind of ramping up and will be back to full speed. The California room is temporarily very short staffed, so we are not open to the public quite yet, but we are serving our patrons from afar, as we have been this past 16 months or whatever it has been. So feel free to go to marinlibrary.org and click on California Room, and you can easily contact us.
Thank you. That's what we needed to know.
Marcy, Julie Case has her hand up.
Did she chat a question? Did I miss something?
No, she didn't chat a question. She has her hand raised.
Oh, I don't see that. Okay. Is she unmuted?
Yes, I'm unmuted.
Okay, what's your question? Marcy. Oh, hi, how are you?
You know me from
Marin County Fair.
Yeah, Marin County Fair and a lot of other stuff. Anyway, I grew up in Terra Linda, and what I want to say is that I just happened to be walking a friend of mine's dog, a couple of weeks ago, and I came upon this out of the blue, never seen it before, but very familiar with it. Grew up, I just celebrated my 61st birthday, so that tells you how long I've been in Marin County. And I had to say, I didn't know anything about it until I saw the sign, took some pictures, showed people, come to find that somebody had shared with me this information. I'm participant in a Facebook page called Made in Marin, shared it with some other people, found a lot of people super interested in it. And I just wanted to say how excited I was. I got a chance to see all the videos, but I really, really, really wanted to tell you guys how great this is, because as I was investigating all this information and people were sharing with me all of this, I asked them, I said, hey, so this is what's going on Tuesday. If you get a chance, watch what's going on and let me know if any of you guys who grew up in Marinwood or Lucas Valley knew about it, because I didn't. And I know this area pretty well. But all I wanted to say is thank you for doing it. I definitely am going to be more interested in it, but I just felt like you kind of needed to hear how great it is. I mean, I'm a Terralinda High School graduate, 1978, and it just was so wonderful. I wish I had had film and all that other stuff to be able to do what you guys did. And I just want to applaud you and encourage you to move forward and continue this process. Maybe even when the Marin County Fair comes back, you get to submit it on some level. I don't know, but anyway, bravo, bravo. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very sweet.
So let me finish up a couple questions here. Are you guys doing another project after this one? I think you talked about doing the history of Nicasio. What was his name? Remind me, Mitchell.
Jim Sam. Yes.
Jim Sam of Nicasio. That's Mitchell's next project, the history of him. How long does it take to do? How long does it take you to do a project?
Georgia too?
Yeah, Georgia and I both are collaborating on it. I suppose for this one, especially since there's more people working on this one, it'll probably be finished by fall. So
okay, I got to find what I can add to you. The name of the cemetery is Marin County Poor Farm. It's on the Marin County open space property. I mean, was the name assigned to this cemetery like Mount Olivet? No, Mount Olivet is the Catholic cemetery. Obviously, the inmates that are buried here in the Poor Farm that either died at Alcatraz getting executed at San Quentin, inmates at San Quentin that were executed. These were obviously inmates that did not claim to be Catholic, because otherwise you'd be buried at Mount Olivet at no expense if you were indigent, but claimed you became Catholic the day before your execution. You know how that goes.
Interesting, Marcy, I looked at the Find a Grave site that was posted by Kathy, and it's called the Marin County Farm Cemetery there, and it has 679 graves listed at the moment with names.
Okay, so you search them by the name of the cemetery. That's interesting.
Or you can scroll. Well, there are different ways to come at that, but her link led to everything grouped under that Marin County Farm Cemetery. And currently there's about 680 graves identified.
Carol, when we record this, does it capture the chat questions and answers?
It does. It's a separate item, but it's available. Yeah.
There's so many the people gave so many information on the websites.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Mitchell, everything we go by the God of Marin County history, Dewey Livingston. I would have shared all that with you too. Great guy, great historian. I think you have a great subject that can go a lot of ways in the history of Jim Sam.
Dewey's here with us, Marcy.
Oh, Dewey is? Oh my gosh. I shouldn't talk about him. You should, everyone should go down to Arizona to see the Dewey Livingston thesis project. I always pitch Dewey. Oh, I'm so glad.
And another plug for the California Room, Dewey is our map archivist.
Oh my God, the best place to go.
So yeah, so he's been helping Mitchell and Georgia.
Is the map room open yet at all?
Same thing. Both of our locations are contact us, and soon will be by appointment only.
Okay.
I also want to be a little cheerleader again for Mitchell and Georgia. I don't think that this was mentioned, but this film was screened at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Los Angeles not too long after it came out. So another feather in the cap. So yay.
Thanks, Carol.
And it won an award, right, Mitchell?
Yes, it did. It won an award for Best Documentary Screenplay at the film festival. So it was quite
exciting. Very exciting.
Okay, more questions?
Any more questions, anybody?
Oh, Gene Powers is asking the question I wanted to ask.
What's that?
Is there a San Quentin?
Oh, there is a San Quentin cemetery up on the hill, which is above where the gun range is. It is has not been used in years and years. It only was the burial sites were identified with wooden markers because back in the day, and then there was a bad fire over the hill, of course, because we're Marin County, and many of the markers were burned just as the ones were at Mount Olivet. and the identifications were not replaced. So the San Quentin Museum has a registry of who was buried there and their inmate numbers, but where they are, if they're still there, is that information is long gone.
Well, they're probably still in the ground, but we don't know.
I'm sure they are, but the markers, there's markers, and you cannot visit that cemetery.
Yeah, obviously. Any other questions?
Oh, Mark. Boot him.
I should mention quickly too.
Yeah.
Mike, the ranger featured in the film is actually, last we spoke with him, he was surveying the graves and trying to do some of his own research to figure out kind of the backstories of each individual grave site buried there. Because he does have that master list that we show scrolling across the screen. So I think he's been diving deep into that recently.
Yeah, he's a good historian for the open space projects.
Definitely.
You just opened this up for so many people.
We did?
More like he opened it up for us too. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a great asset when I did my research. I should do that walking tour again soon because it's a good one. I don't know, people just like to go to cemeteries.
Yeah.
That the Halloween spooky walk that the Rangers do, I thought it was even though it's more kind of focused to the youth and educating that, I thought it was interesting about the animals. Of course, I drugged my sister to it, and I don't think she ever let me forget that. But I loved the bats in the trees. I went there. I really thought they were going to show us bats in the trees, and it was baseball bats tied up in the trees. And the Rangers just support that so much. They dress up as mad scientists. They do a kind of spooky stuff. It's a really good project. And then the next weekend I did my cemetery tour, so it was quite a mix. But really want to thank the two of you for being available to do this, to present it for the Marin History Museum supporters and membership. Special thank you to Carol.
I have a really quick question.
Yes, David.
Just for Georgia and Mitchell, I love asking this question of filmmakers because, as we know, making a film, be it a movie, a short film, or a documentary, takes a lot of time and effort and personal care. What do you both come away with having accomplished this? I mean, these things just don't happen. You have to put a lot of midnight oil into it. What do you guys come away with? What is your personal satisfaction in accomplishing this documentary?
This documentary, it was a long process, and it was something I've never worked on a project for this long. So it taught me a lot of life skills and perseverance, motivation, how to keep motivated for so long and to keep a passion for so long. And I've always been passionate about history, but this really enacted like even more of a passion. And there's just so much history that is forgotten, and I don't like that, and I want it to be out there in the world. So I feel like for the rest of my life, I want to keep on finding new stories like this to bring to light. And it taught me a lot about filmmaking and the process of it, and it definitely helped me as a filmmaker as well. So yeah.
Thank you.
I think, hi, Dad. I think,
hi, son.
It's kind of along very similar lines to what Georgia said. I think first and foremost, it really taught me that the reason I like filmmaking is the very simple drive of having a question and wanting an answer. That's the same thing that has me going into all this stuff about Jim Sam right now, is just stumbling across something curious and wanting to learn more about it. And secondly, you know, the graveyard obviously had all this historical discussion behind it, but it also drove a lot of the reporters we were talking to and stuff were asking us about mortality and, you know, time and history and what it all means. And I think a lot of it really revealed to me that, you know, I'm in film school right now, but documentaries interest me the most. And I think what this really showed me is that there's, you know, endless stories that you can create, but there's already so much here to explore. And the world is a lot more fascinating than people give it credit for if you're just willing to look for it. So going into future projects and just generally trying to live life. I think that's kind of my takeaway.
Well, I agree with both of you. I mean, I have
Thank
the
you.
same feeling. When I create a walking tour, it takes about a year to put it together, to do the research on the locations and get, you know, either truth or, as I always say, I make it up because it's true as the last guy standing. But my mission on it is what was here before me. And I go backwards from there. And my first walking tour in history that I did on the history of Smith Ranch Road, which is opposite to Lucas Valley. You know, I started living in the mobile homes there, and I started with a cow, and I went all the way back to the brickyard. But it's all there, and it's just. But people say, "Oh, do a tour of this, do a tour of that." I go, you know, it's more than that. It takes a while, and then it becomes your passion, and your research and your love. And I think that's great. And you did a fantastic job, and you deserved every award that you received. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here too. It's amazing
Yeah.
just seeing the turnout.
Thank
It was
you.
good. What was our total, Carol? Maybe Carol's not. Do you know how many, Ann, we have?
I think we had about 61 at the.
Oh, great. Very good. Good.
Finish.
That's a good turnout.
So that's really good.
Okay.
I see.
Thank
Does
you all
Vicky?
for coming.
I think Vicky has her hand up.
Oh, Vicky does?
Oh, sorry.
I can't see these hands up. Vicky, oh, yes, she does. Vicky, you have a question? Unmute yourself. Unmute.
Sorry, that was an accident, but I was going to just text in to say that thank you, Marcy, for, you know, again, you're always researching interesting subjects, and to the two filmmakers, bravo, and keep going. This was really fun. So looking forward to the next event. Good to see everybody.
David, was this at the Mill Valley Film Festival?
Is this really for David, or is
Oh,
this
no,
his-
no, I'm sorry. I meant Mitchell. I'm sorry, David.
No worries.
Hi.
We're related.
No, so we actually submitted to the Mill Valley Film Festival when it first was released, and if I remember correctly, we were kind of in a gray area where we didn't quite meet the requirements for short form submissions generally, but we also didn't reach the requirement for junior submissions from high schoolers and things like that. I think it had to do with duration and the genre itself. But
too bad.
Yeah, no,
It's a
but I mean,
it is a complicated process.
definitely.
Kind of like applying for a grant. Too much work. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mitchell. And thank you, Georgia. Thank you, David, for having such
thank
great
you all.
kids. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, I'm ending.
Thank you, Ann.
Bye.